Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the lyrics from Extinction A.D, Culture of Violence, out March 18th on Unique Leader Records. The album has 10 tracks, 38 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an American thrash crossover metal band. As far as the design goes, this record is straightforward. What you see is what you get. It's pedal to the metal from beginning all the way to the end. It's a very linear album from that perspective. It doesn't have peaks and valleys. It doesn't have ebbs and flows. There are some nuances from song to song and within the songs themselves that give you some of an idea that something is changing, something is happening. But the overall brutality, the overall movement that this record has overshadows everything else. So when you get to the end of the experience, the record feels very uniform, very balanced, and very cohesive. But because it's only 10 songs, 38 minutes, the playability of the record is not affected. The album still feels fresh every single time you press play. And this is an important aspect. When you have this much aggression, when you have this much intensity, and the album is moving just in one single direction, you want to make sure that the experience is short, compact, so that you don't overburden the listener, so you don't become repetitive. And this album definitely has all the right attributes to increase that playability and make the album better all around. As far as the soundscape goes, thrash crossover, old school, really old school, across all the different elements. The overall sound, drums, guitars, bass, how they interact with one another, how they sound individually. Everything about this album is definitely old school approach, thrash crossover metal. Now, this is not a band that's trying to have a foot in the present, a foot in the past. No, they're just going completely old school, and that's fine. And when you're listening to this album sound-wise, you can pinpoint the influences, the bands that inspire the band, that inspire them to pick up their instruments and create a record like this. Bands like Pantera, MOD, Slayer, Testament. They are sprinkled throughout this entire record, and bringing influences from different bands within similar genres, or the same genre in some cases, allows them to have a little bit more variety, but not necessarily go outside the beaten path, still keeping the record sound-wise very consistent, very balanced, very straightforward movement. But it's the beauty of those small changes, those small nuances that really create some internal movement within the record itself, making the album feel more engaging, increasing the overall playability. Now, as far as those individual elements are concerned, the drums have a very powerful sound, but not overpowering. They're also not very thick. They don't have a lot of warmth, but they're also not very thin. They're somewhere in between. The drums have this in-between sound that increases and decreases depending on the intensity, depending on the aggression of the songs. Consistent in terms of the output quality, but not as consistent in terms of exactly what is happening. So this also gives some movement. It gives some ebbs and flows of heaviness from song to song and within the songs themselves. Another great element of this record is the bass. The bass tone, the grooviness, the chunkiness, the dirtiness that the bass has is phenomenal throughout the entire album. It peaks in some songs more than others, that's understandable, but it also has an important role all around, regardless of how much you notice of it. The role that it has, it's really to glue the drums and guitars together in order for the wall of sound to be as thick, as powerful, and not just depending on one single element in order to create that thickness and that substance around it. Now, the guitars on this record, you're going to get some very fun solos to listen to. The solos feel really explosive on this album. They match the intensity that the track has, they match the aggression that the tracks have. But on the other side, as far as the riffs, as far as the melodies are concerned, the guitars is really the element that adds that sense of dirtiness to the overall perspective of this record, that really pushes the sound more towards an old school approach. I would have liked to see the guitars feel a little bit cleaner, not totally clean, but perhaps a little bit thicker, a little bit chunkier, and not as dirty, not as grimy as they come across throughout this entire record. It doesn't hurt the style of the album because this album is old school, so it has almost that, small club atmosphere to how the guitars and overall soundscape comes across. But I think some tracks on this album, if they had changed that approach and not go as uniform, it would definitely create some more ebbs and flows, some more peaks and valleys, making the album feel even more dynamic and not necessarily having this straightforward motion that it currently has. As far as vocals are concerned, super consistent. What you get in the first song is going to be exactly what you're going to get all the way throughout. There are some changes here and there in terms of adding more melody and changing the tone ever so slightly in order to help create a little bit more of a hook, making the songs a little bit more catchier. But all of this movement is part of the overall big picture. This is a record that has a lot of moving pieces. The vocals are no different. but they fit perfectly with the soundscape. They fit perfectly with the aggression and intensity that the album holds. I just really feel like they are one of those elements that you can gravitate to, that adds all of that stuff to the experience of the album, but you can really feel like they're taking you along for a ride. They're carrying you through. They're your narrator throughout these 38 minutes, 10 songs. Now, all around, this is a very heavy-packed album. It packs a punch. It comes at you fast and furious from the beginning. There are some internal movements that perhaps slow that aggression, slow that intensity ever so slightly, but overall, when you get to the end of the record, you just feel like you've been run over by the album. It just has that sort of power, it has that sort of feel. Growing up listening to thrash in the late 80s, early 90s, and even crossover, listening to this record was really a blast from the past. It took me to that time. I felt like I was listening to New York, crossover, thrash metal, MOD, SOD. Those kind of bands are really well represented in this more modern approach, but still with old school values. As far as favorite tracks are concerned, I want to start off with Culture of Violence opening track. And it's a great opening track because everything you're going to get here musically and vocally is represented then throughout the entire record. It has a killer bass line, something you're going to see throughout. Killer guitars as far as driving the force of the record. The drums pack a huge punch, and then the vocals just hop on top of everything and guide your experience. This song is a microcosm of the entire record. The chorus has a little bit of a Pantera vibe, and I really enjoy it because it changed from what you were getting in the verses. The verses perhaps a little bit more direct, the chorus a little bit more groovier, and that's where you get that Pantera influence coming in, making the song internally feel a lot more dynamic with ups and downs, with an interesting approach. Still very high octane throughout, but definitely you see the difference between the verses and the chorus. Next you have Heads Will Roll, a club banger. You're walking into a club, a band is playing, you never heard of them before. This is what you expect. Balls to the wall, aggression, mosh, circle pit, absolute insanity, great guitar riffs, a call and answer style vibe vocally, which works really well in a live setting, adding to that whole club vibe that this song has. Just an incredible chorus, very melodic in its approach, both musically and vocally. I really felt like the chorus really added energy to this whole song. Everything kind of feeds off of that energy, actually, of the chorus. A song that is packed with energy all around, and it just has great movement, super catchy, phenomenal track. One of my favorites, if not my favorite song on this entire record. Last but not least, Strangled, banner. Great guitar sound all around. It allows the vocals to create the ebbs and flows, allowing the song musically to be a little bit more linear, but the vocals are the ones that are really pulling the strings as far as how you feel towards this song. Now, the chorus has a huge Testament vibe. Musically and even vocally, there are some tones, there are some notes that have a huge Testament influence, like I said, musically and vocally. That makes the song feel a little bit different when you're going through it. It almost gives you a sense of familiarity once you get into that chorus, when you hear those tones, when you hear those notes. Really interesting song from that perspective and how it's all put together. Once again, the verses a lot more direct. There's a little bit more movement or a little bit more texture in the chorus, making the song feel like it's changing from one approach to another, creates internal movement, and overall makes the track feel a lot more robust, a lot more direct, but definitely a throwback thrash metal song all around. This is it, Extinction A.D, Culture of Violence, out March 18th on Unique Leader Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.